A guten Erev Shabbos, dear friends. A guten Shabbos, Ari. A guten Shabbos, everyone that's joining us.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Great. This week, I went into the bookstore to buy a whole bunch of books. In Kahos, there's, it's like a candy store. So I went in to buy a whole bunch of Svarim that I was waiting for, and it just went out of, just Baruch Hashem came in print. A couple of these Svarim, a couple of other Svarim. Very nice. Then I see, hey, they have these books. I grew up as a kid with these Machanaim books. I loved them as a kid. You know, the thing with these, when we were children, they didn't have that much. You didn't have rows and rows of books to pick from in the kosher book section. So this was something special. But I think it still remains. It's not only a nostalgia in my mind, but I figured I'd buy one. I bought actually 54 books in English, and I figured I'd buy one in Yiddish. The thing I like about these books is that there's like a lot of neshama to the book. You know, the Yid always has a lot of chen in his eyes, and the goy is a goy, and the Yid is a Yid. I think there's a very strong message in the art. It's interesting that the artist not necessarily was that religious, but he came from the shtetl, and you know, a Poritz looks like a Poritz, and a Kozak looks like a Kozak, and a Jew always has, you know, a couple, you know, is always looks like the refined person, so on. Anyway, I figured I'd buy a book. So I bought in English, and as I said, I bought one just for the sake of my childhood, that I grew up with the Yiddish. So I bought one book, 54 books I bought in English, and one I bought in Yiddish. And I come home and I read the story for the kids. It's a fascinating book. It's a story about Rashi and the Count Gottfried, who was leading the Crusaders to Yerushalayim, and he seeks Rashi's advice. And long story, make the long story short, that Rashi tells him that if you go, you will be successful. You will conquer Jerusalem. You will be there for 3 days, and the Muslims will defeat you. You will return to this city with but 2 men. 2 people you'll return with. Okay. So this guy is angry, and he says, if I return even with 3 men, I will chas v'shalom, Rahman al-Islam. He would kill him and just throw his flesh to the dogs. Okay. Well, exactly what Ashi said is what happened, lahafli, and he comes back. He has this terrific defeat. I'm giving a plug-in for this book. Yeah, you can go buy these books, even if you're adult. And he comes back. He was defeated, but he comes back with 3 men. And he says, where's the prophecy? He said, I come back with 2 men. I get to kill him and throw him to the dogs. And then as they're entering, as soon as they are about to step through the gate of the city, a rock falls on one of his men, and he dies, and he actually enters into the gate with only 2 men. But when he enters and he comes to the Beis Medrash of Rashi had just passed away. And the last line of the book is the Tog for Rashi's Yortzeit is Chof Tes Tammuz. The day of Rashi's passing is Chof Tes Tammuz. And I jumped up. I said, oh, wow, today is Chof Tes Tammuz. Out of 150 something, 55 booklets, I picked up one in Yiddish, and it was relevant for that day. It was Rashi's Yortzeit of Chof Tes Tammuz. Every detail in our life is Hashgacha Pratis, and there's always messages that Hashem sends us. Sometimes we see, the wink that God sends us. So I'm opening up the Chumash. I'm opening up the Chumash, and I noticed something remarkable. And this is the description that day Chumash. I'm talking about that day, that Tuesday Chumash, Chof Tes Tammuz. That the Moshe Rabbeinu says that the Meraglim complained, and they put fear in the heart of the Jews about going into Eretz Yisrael. Oh no, nachnu olam. How can we enter? How can we go up How where are we going up? They melted the hearts of the Jews by giving them fear, feeding them information that gave them fear. Am Godel v'Ramimenu. These are great big nation. Arim Gedolos of Etzudas Bashamayim, that there are cities that are big and fortified in the heaven. V'gam Bnei Anok Sham, we also saw there the sons of giants. So Rashi says, Arim Gedolos of Etzudas Bashamayim, big cities fortified into the heaven. So I have here a beautiful commentary on Rashi called Rashi Kipshute. It's really, really good. So he says that it bothers Rashi. What do you mean, Orim Gedolos v'tzuras b'shamayim? Chidal al daitche shemagiyas ad l'shamayim. You build a city till the heaven. I think he didn't really fully understand Rashi's question. It's bashamayim, in the heaven. You don't build cities in the heaven, even if they're small cities, even if they're not fortified. The main thing that's bothering Rashi is Orim bashamayim. How do you build cities in the heaven? Even if they're katanas and prozis, how do you build in the heaven? How do you build into the heaven? You could maybe one day they'll figure out how to build a houses in Mars, maybe on the moon, but just azoi bashamayim. How do you build cities in the shamayim? So Rashi answers Dibru haksuvim loshen havai. It's loshen havai. It's an exaggeration. It's an exaggeration. They just said, they are big cities, unbelievable cities. It's as if someone went and built cities in the sky. If you built a city in the sky, who can conquer a city? A city that's built in the sky, very high in the sky. It's like cities that were built in the sky. Okay. But wait a minute. When Kolev said, Oloi Nala, they said, Ono anachnu oilam, where are we going up? It's impossible. You can't build cities in the heaven. But when Kolev and Yeshua said, Oloi Nala, Rashi says, in Pasha Shlach, if you remember, Rashi says, Afilo Imr Lanu, that even if Moshe Rabbeinu says we should take Sulamis ladders and we should climb up to the sky, if that's what Moshe says, Oloi Nala, we can go up even to the sky. Over there, Rashi doesn't say Loshen Havai, that it's an exaggeration. Why? I'm not trying to say deep shotim here, things that require mefarshim like the Maral Miprag or the Belio Mizrahi or the other commentaries. Adavar Pashut. When the Meraglim say that the Goyim built cities fortified and they're in the sky, obviously it's Loshen Havai. It's a guzma. It's an exaggeration. Everyone understands it's impossible to build a city in the heaven. They still didn't figure out how to build a city in Mars or to get regular flights for pleasure up to the moon. You're telling me that the Chiti and the Prizi, they figured out how to build cities in the sky? Nonsense. It's Loshen Havai. But when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Asu salumos v'nalu l'shamayim, let's take and take the ladders and put it straight up. Where? Just hold it. Start climbing to the sky. Reuven, you hold it. Shimon, you start climbing. Then there's no, Rashi doesn't say, oh, how could that be? Loshen Havai, it's an exaggeration. If Moshe Rabbeinu says to Kirichin and Himmel, Mekan Kirichin and Himmel. If Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't worry, just go, just start climbing up the ladder. How many rungs? How are we going to get there? We're going to, don't worry. Just start stepping, one step at a time, and don't worry, we're going to get up to the Shamayim. So this is really something that we touch. When does Yid climb up to the heaven? When you listen to the Meraglim, you don't climb up to the heaven. But when you listen to Kolev Ben Yefuna, who says, listen and trust Moshe Rabbeinu. Just Moshe Rabbeinu says, start climbing, you start climbing. Because just like Moshe Rabbeinu in his time and Ash in his time, they really could see. They have 20/20 vision. They could see. And if Moshe Rabbeinu says, I could see all the Nala, don't worry, we're going to go. And Rashi says to Mr. Gottfried, I could see. You're going to travel, Rahman al-Aslan, the rivers of blood and tears that they sowed behind them in destroying Jewish communities. Rashi could see it all. And Rashi said, you'll be the 3 days in Yerushalayim. you'll be defeated by the Muslim. You'll come back with 2 men, not 3, 2 men. Rashi could see. Rashi could see. Moshe Rabbeinu sees. They have 20/20 vision. And therefore, when the Meraglim say, I'm Godel, Adam Gedolos Betzuris Bashamayim, that's Havai. That's exaggeration. But when Kalev says, he says, make ladders and go up to heaven, we can make ladders and we can go into heaven. There's another beautiful yahrzeit to celebrate now. And in the 9 days, it's a special time to look at Gedolei Yisrael and to learn from them and to take a lesson from them into our daily lives. And that's this Sunday. This Sunday is the yahrzeit of the Ari Achai, Yitzchak Luria. He was nifted at such a tender young age, at the age of 38. Could you imagine? And his main learning was Nigla until he was in his 30s. He wrote together with his Rebbe the Shitta Mekubetzes. People don't realize the main time in his life that he spent was to write the Shitta Mekubetzes, which we learn in the yeshivas, the Meshivish Masechtas. The Kabbalah was in the last few years in his life, and now this Sunday is Hey Menachem Av. It's the yahrzeit of 448 years. He was nifted in the year Shin Lamed Beis, and now it's Tafshin Pei. So it's 448 years. Now we're going into the year 449. There's a beautiful letter. I sent it. Says, thank you very much, Shabio, for sending out Madam Ekoimis. And I sent out a letter here that Rebbe wrote on a Motzei Shabbos Chazon, or on a Motzei Shabbos, the same kvius like this year, in the year Tafshin Lamed Beis. Beautiful letter. Shalom u'bracha. Today, he says, is the yahrzeit of the Arizal. Arizal, it's interesting, was called Ari Achai because tzaddikim, they live, and the Arizal, because of its tzidkis, we say that in Jewish history, the Arizal was called Ari Achai, the living Ari. It's also, if you think about it, a play on words, because Shlomo Melech says that Toiv Kelev Hameis Meri Achai, that a dead dog is better than a lion that's alive, and the Rebbe Yitzchak Luria was called the Ari, the lion. So the Yidden wanted to emphasize that I'm just telling you my pshat, Minig Yisrael, to emphasize that you don't think that this is the lion that passed on, and therefore the dog that's living is bigger than the lion that passed on. But it's not true. The Ari Hachai, it's the lion that's living. It's the lion that's living. And that's why it was, I think, this Minig Yisrael, because it was already, the acronym was Ari, which means lion. So they wanted to emphasize that the tzaddik lives on and he's Ari Achai. Specifically, that this Sunday was 400 years of this Talkus. Again, this letter was sent out 48 years ago, so now it's 448 years of these Talkus of that Arizal. Shas HaKosher, it's a special and opportune time to think about the life of that Arizal and how to take things from his life into our life. And then the last paragraph. Who could say, I'm going to climb up on the ladder? I am going to climb up to heaven like the Ari. He's Ayr v'Kadash min Shemayim Nochis. He's Agon Elaki. However, turn the page, we find that Rebbe quotes from the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says about Moshe Rabbeinu and Tanya that there's something that shines from him to every single Yid in every generation. So therefore, if you can't be a major Moshe, you could be a miniature Moshe. So we could take things, if we can't be mamish on the level of the Arizal, we can't be mamish on the level of Rashi, but we could start walking up that ladder, and we could take lessons from them and implement it in our own life. And there's beautiful 3 points that the Rebbe brings that we learn from the Arizal: the Torah, the mitzvahs, and in general. the Arizal says Reb Chaim Vital, Reisi lemoiri, Mizgaber ke'ari bekoyach be'eshe oisek malacha ache nila umazia. That he would learn that he would break in a sweat, break out in the sweat. What we say, what's the, in other words, if it was a deep subject, it was obviously, he wrote the Shittim Kubetzes. The Marizal was brilliant. He didn't need to come into a sweat. But why did he learn? Because he would have to take a shmat and tie it around his forehead because there was so much sweat. So the answer is, when you do exercise, because for whatever reason, because you want to, for blood flow, strength of the heart, limbs, and so on, one of the ways you know that we went over the threshold of stam a little bit, lifting weights or walking a little bit or pedaling a little bit to the level of actual health benefit is when you break out in the sweat. When you start sweating, when you're jogging and you're sweating, or you're biking and you're sweating, and so on, you know that, now we're burning calories. Now it's my heart is pumping. It's good. It's good for the brain. It's good for the heart. It's good for every limb in the body. When you break out in the sweat, the Arizal wanted to learn Torah until he breaks out in the sweat. Why? Because Torah is tushia shemeteshes koiche shel oitzeg ba. It breaks the koyach. In other words, it breaks the koyach of the beastly soul. Just like physical exercise, when you sweat, you know, that this is an exercise. The same thing here. That is, I learned to know that he broke into his nefesh habahamis, into his beastly soul, that the kedusha penetrated into the beastly soul. So he learned until he sweat, and broke out in the sweat. Tzedakah. So do you know the Arizal, when he would go to buy a mitzvah, he would go to buy a mezuzah, go buy an esek, he would take his wallet and he would go to the merchant. He would take the wallet and go like this. Here it is. You take. He never would bargain for a mitzvah. Mitzvah, he wouldn't bargain for a mitzvah. So that's the lesson that we learned from that Arizal. And the third thing is, it's brought in the Svarim that Arizal, the Alter Rebbe brings in Torah Oir, that Arizal is samach ma'od ba'asiyas ha'mitzvah lakach zochel l'ruach ha'kodesh. He had intense simcha every time he had the opportunity to do a mitzvah, and that brought him to have ruach ha'kodesh. The Rebbe says we should take these three lessons and try to implement it in our life. So someone will say, Arizal, Ari Achai, the living lion, the living legend, you want me, the dog, to be like the lion? But it's not true. Because, as we see from Rashi, Rashi says, when it comes to the Meraglim say, it's just an exaggeration. Or when Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlomi Yitzchaki, or the Arizal, Rashi or the Arizal, that they tell us, Rabbi Yitzchak Ludia, Shlomo Yitzchaki tell us, Asu Sulamas, we could do it, and we'll be able to climb into the heaven. The Eibusher will help that every one of us going into the Shabbos Chazon, that we should be zeicha to be Ola Nala, that we should have an Aliyah in Avodas Hashem, especially this Shabbos. As the Heilige Baditcher said, that every Yid has a vision of seeing the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi, that every one of us in our Avodas Hashem should take to heart that we could be a miniature Rashi, we could be a miniature Moshe Rabbeinu, we could be a miniature Arizal. We should get onto that ladder and start climbing up. Don't worry about how far it is. That when it comes to the naysayers, they comes to the Meraglim, they say, "Ooh, it's so far. Where are you going to get?" Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry about how we're going to get into the heaven. We have to worry how to get onto the ladder. We have to worry about getting onto the ladder, taking one step at a time in these lessons that we learn from Rashi and the Ari Achai. And the rest, they'll be the Rashi and the Arizal will take care of it. They'll help us get up there. All the Nala, the Rashi, the Eibusher should help the Shabbos. We should be Zoicha that we should have our own Ola Nala and our own Avodas Hashem, that we should be redeemed from our own issues in our Avodas Hashem, and all Klal Yisrael should be redeemed from this bitter golus, and should be Ola Nala v'Yarashnu. I said that we'll actually physically go up to Eretz Yisrael, the Vias Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
Bruchim to you. Okay.